Oh, well, it's broadcasting to all attendees now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're live. Okay.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Dr. Nelson Ogunshakin from FIDIC, broadcasting to you on this webinar series. We are actually on the webinar number 16, and today we'll be looking at learning lessons from how countries and governments have dealt with the issue of COVID pandemic in their countries. We have fantastic speakers all over the world who will join us today. I'm delighted to host this meeting this particular morning. Some statistics. I understand not too long ago the World Health Organization declared that we do have a pandemic, and since then we've had over 6.5 million people affected by the COVID. We've lost over 388,000 people, and people over 3.1 million are currently recovering. It is not a very good news in the sense that this is a sad, situation for the world. And for those who lost their life, our condolences are to them and to their family. For those who lost a loved one, but this issue is going beyond health and safety. It's really impacted the industry and the economy. Today, we are looking at what various governments are doing in their countries, and hopefully we can learn some lessons to them. As ever, this program is programmed to be 1 hour, 30 minutes, but because we have global speakers today, and we may push ourselves a little bit to 1 hour, 45 minutes. I do understand that, there is a huge demand on the internet system, and we may have difficulties. Should we have that difficulties, we do everything we can to make sure we come back to you. So please bear with us. We'll do our best. If for any reason I disappear off the planet, my colleague and the worker will step in as a backup, to make sure we are progressing order. As ever, I want to do this 5 minutes introduction, which is to welcome everybody, wherever you are around the world. On average, we get over 500-600 people participating in this particular event. I'm told we've got close to 600 people registered today, and it'll be interesting to see how we proceed. I'm also informed that, out of the 18 program, we are actually on the number 16, which means we have 2 to go. Having said that, the topic is fascinating. And also in the usual manner, I'm delighted to make sure that we have our president, Bill Howard, supporting us today. Bill, I don't know how Bill does it. Every day, religiously, he joins us. So I'm delighted to invite Bill to give us an opening speech. Bill, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson, and I will try to be very brief. As I always do in these webinars, I'd like to thank and congratulate Nelson and his fine secretariat team for putting on these very timely webinars. Under any circumstances, putting on global webinars of these topics would be very difficult. Under the atmosphere of a global pandemic, it's just incredibly challenging. And my compliments to Nelson and the Secretariat for their very hard work in putting these webinars together. I also would like to personally thank our speakers today. As Nelson mentioned, we have 6 or 7 folks who are going to be speaking to us, so I want to get off pretty quick and turn the matter over to subject matter experts who are with us from all around the world. Everyone is very busy. These speakers are certainly busy with their businesses, and with a pandemic upon us, I'm sure they all have family issues as well. So a particular thanks to them for spending some time with us. I'd also like to thank those who are joining us to listen in on the webinars and participate with questions. It's very encouraging to us to see so many people joining these webinars and asking such great questions. It's really reinforcing to us that we're doing the right thing in putting on these webinars. The only other item I'd just like to quickly mention is in all of the webinars, virtually in all of the webinars, we've chatted at least a little bit about the role that engineers can have in helping the world out of this pandemic. One of the common strategies in past economic difficulties has been to encourage governments to fund infrastructure. And certainly, even though there's a lot of change going on, caused by this epidemic and pandemic. One thing that has not changed is the need for the world to invest more in infrastructure. In fact, the pandemic may actually be causing us to invest even more. When these webinars are over, one of the next tasks that Nelson and I and the rest of the FIDIC Secretariat will be trying to address is assisting our members in providing information on the need for infrastructure related to climate change, health, sustainability, and all those other things that were certainly with us before the pandemic and will be with us afterwards. All with a goal in mind to help us communicate to decision makers the need to invest and how that will help in the recovery. So with that, Nelson, I'd like to turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. I mean, I'm always very, very, very pleased to have your support. And again, I can't overstate this. It must be 5 or 6 o'clock in the United States, and yes, you're with us. Just going through, before I invite Lou to speak, I think I need to put this into context that this is the 16 out of the 18. We started by looking at how this thing is affecting our member association around the world. We discussed issues about force majeure, which are the challenges that people feel in contract. Is it force majeure or not? We discussed joint venture and how this is impacting joint venture relationship. We talked specifically about role of consultancy in contractual format. We looked at issue about risk and insurance, and we had a lot of time to discuss that. We look at alternative dispute resolution. The conclusion was it's more of a collaboration. We want an industry together. We are spending more and more time working from home. The world of digital is a big issue. So we talked about working from home, digital impact, and now is that impacting people. We spent some time to look at managing people and resources. We also look at our balance sheet. How do we protect our balance sheet? How do we make sure we have a business that's going concern? We look at how do we respond to crisis management. We look at the issue about communication. The message that came out of communication is whatever situation we have, it's important that we look at engaging at the right level. We also spent some time to look at kickstarting the industry. And we looked at, what does new normal looks like yesterday? And that was insightful. Today, we are looking back. What are various countries doing? And how exactly are the government dealing with the issue? What lesson can we learn? On that note, having had Bill speaking, I'm delighted to invite Lou again from China to give us his view and perspective from what the Chinese government is doing and how they're responding to the issue. Lou, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. Hello, everybody. Our respect friends and colleagues in the industry. In the past several months, there are more than 200 countries suffered from COVID-19 pandemic. Although the situation varies from region to region, country to country, but the pandemic seriously disrupts the global economy and our people's normal life. Till today, it had led to more than 6 million infected cases and killed more than 382,000 human lives. Different countries taken similar or different measures to combat the COVID-19 crisis. And for winning the universal war against COVID-19, global solidarity and collaboration is very important. I think this already become a consensus between the industry, between the countries. Here in China, we're suffering the COVID-19 epidemic from end of last year. The strategy we adopt here is for the epicenter, which is Wuhan city and Hubei province, concentrated containment. For the rest areas of the country, taking strict joint prevention and control measures. There is a forecast in an article published in Science Journal, Nature. If Chinese government did not introduce any restrictive measures to help control the virus, the total number of COVID-19 cases could be could have reached 7.7 million. And what's the reality? The reality is that till today in China, the total confirmed cases is 84,603, with 4,645 died, 79,831 recovered, and currently there are 127 under treatment. Getting this achievement is really not easy. Recalling the past months, the several months, is what China did it can be divided briefly into two stages. First stage is from the end of last year till the March of this year. This stage, we can call it emergent containment stage. Is my observation, what the government did is, first in the epicenter, Wuhan, testing, finding the virus and infect cases as much as you can, lockdown, tracing, isolating, and breaking the chains of transmission. Quickly constructed the 2 emergency hospitals, that only takes 10 days, and building 16 mobile cabin hospitals to fill the gap of medical facilities. That's really a big gap for the medical facilities there. At the same time, from the nationwide, under census, we have got to help Wuhan, not Wuhan got us into this. With these sensors around the country, there are 42,000 medical workers mobilized to Wuhan and the rest cities in Hubei province, filling the big gap of medical resources there. At that time, that's a really very, very big challenge for the medical resources shortage there. During this stage, at the same time, for the rest areas which are not in the epicenter, what China did is put the testing work in place, identifying and treating timely any suspected and confirmed cases, preventing and any further spread of the virus in the communities. It was demonstrated very effective measures. Just take an example. For the city I lived, Shanghai. Maybe you know, Shanghai, that's with a big populations, around 30 million populations here. Here today, there are 673 infected cases. And this figure includes 332, that's imported cases. Only, there is 7 died and 661 recovered. From the figures, we can call it a success. And of course, it should be contributed to the right actions taken by the authorities and active response and support from all the citizens. Till end of March, the spread of the COVID-19 epidemic in China has been basically contained, and the risk of sporadic cases, imported cases, and the local outbreaks still remains. So this is brief for the first stage. From March, China entered into the second stage, and we can call it new normal. After more than 3 months urgent containment, especially 2 months lockdown of Wuhan city and the rest cities in Hubei province, the social economy and the life of citizens need to back to normal. As a staff need to back to work, back to business. For those students need to back to school. But the challenge is that COVID-19 will not disappear automatically right now. And the vaccine on COVID-19 is still under development. There are different forecasts on the availability of the vaccine, but the consensus is that it won't be ready very soon. But our economy and the business need to continue and cannot wait too long, wait so long. We have to accept a new normal, which is maintain the necessary prevention measures, and at the same time, our life leads back to normal as much as we can. For this new normal, I think there are several features for our life, our behavior, and our working tools. First, social distancing. As an effective measure, social distancing need always be kept in mind. Second, maintain proper habits. Washing hands frequently, taking masks once the situation needs. Of course, for wearing masks, I think it varies from culture to culture, country to country. But in China and in many Asian countries, this is a commonly acceptable method there. Third, remote networking technology could and will become one of our normal working tools. Depends on the industry and the business you involve. And of course,
Lou, we need to wrap up, please. Okay.
And of course, for such a severe disaster, back to normal, it is not easy, especially for those epicenter. Fear of the virus is inevitable for the society. Just recently, for mitigating the risks and also building the confidence of the citizens, Wuhan government authority decided taking 10 days conducting nucleic acid testing for 10 million citizens. So this is briefly about the two stages. And what actions taken on the economy recovery for the government? China, as the first country to enter lockdown, its economy was heavily hit by the epidemic. The statistics of the first quarter of 2020 shows that it is the first time in more than 40 years the Chinese economy contracted in a quarter by 6.8% from the same period of last year. Even more for Hubei province, that's the 40% contractions. Investment in fixed assets and consumption as two important engines for economic growth fell sharply by more than 15% in the first 2 months. The good thing is that in the March, all these figures and the statistics shows that it can be recovered.
Okay, thanks very much. We need to try and wrap up now, Lou. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I move on to the next speaker, Lou? Thank you very much for that helicopter view from China, which is the source of the COVID-19, and it's nice to know that the two-stage approach is working. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, where we've got a panel of speakers around the world. And I'm really keen to make sure we go through this. I know that there's a lot of experiences around the world. Given the choice, we can spend the whole of the session on each country. But what I'm looking at is an opportunity for us to have an interactive question and answer. So I'm going to invite, Antonio Bonet to open up, with his, 5 to 6 minutes overview of what is happening, what experience you have from the country, and how best we can go for. So Anthony from Spain, would you, follow up with Lou? Anthony, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose you can all hear me well. Huh?
Yes, we can. We can. Thank you very much, Antonio.
Well, first of all, thank you, Nelson and William, to inviting me to this webinar, which I consider most interesting. I have to reckon that my company is not an engineering nor construction company. However, the association that I chair does have many engineering construction companies that are members of FIDIC. And we have also as members a variety of companies, from banks, insurance companies, law firms, oil and gas, manufacturing. So I do know a little bit about the concerns and the industry that the engineering and construction industry. I've been asked to speak briefly about what was done in Spain for the crisis and to make some comments about it. Well, I have to say that the Spanish government has done something very similar to what other countries in Europe and North America have done, which is basically increase liquidity of a company, give them cash through a program of guarantees, government guarantees to banks so that they can lend quickly and with less risk to companies. Figures are 100 billion euros, so big figures. And there was specifically one liquidity line for exporting companies with a much less amount, 2 billion euro, but still specifically for exporters, while the big one, the 100 billion, was for any type of company. There have been delays in submission of and payment of tax receipts, VAT, personal income tax, corporate tax, so various delays to facilitate that companies retain some cash and be able to pay their suppliers and employers. There has been, like in many other countries, measures regarding temporary layoffs of staff and mass redundancies to facilitate that they're not permanent, but only temporary while the crisis lasts. And there have also been some measures to restrict foreign direct investment or investment in the stock exchange so as not to give opportunities, because I mean the stock exchange, I mean quotations were so low because of the crisis, to avoid takeovers unwanted because of very low prices. Now these measures, so very similar to what other countries have done. What was incorrect or not well done in Spain? A couple of things. And I think that this happens, it has happened also in some other countries. The timing, it was late normally, and measures took time to be announced and implemented. So there was not a very quick reaction, and that really can hurt companies. Second, uncertainty. Companies, we did not know what was going to be the measures and what was going our governments to put in place to facilitate the sorting out, the exit of this crisis. And there were many changes. For instance, temporary mass redundancies. The government established a period until the end of June, then it extended that period. Same thing with taxes. So there were too many changes. And these changes, they cause uncertainty. And what we don't want is uncertainty. I mean, we have already enough uncertainty with the COVID-19 to have even more uncertainty. Then labor legislation. As you know, we have in Spain, in government, there's the Socialist Party with an extreme left party, and they are very much against a labor reform. The very far left party, very much against the labor reform that was done 8 years ago, that was excellent and it had very good results for the reduction of unemployment. But they wanted to withdraw that reform, and that has caused also an uproar by companies, because we all thought, all companies, that that reform was quite good. Concerns. What are the main concerns of our companies? And definitely our member companies in the Exporters and Investors Club. And as I mentioned before, I mean, we have a variety of manufacturers, electricity, oil, gas, engineering, so insurance company. I think we have many concerns, but I think that there's two concerns which are specifically important. One is restrictions to mobility. Why? Because And you're very familiar with that because if you have to put in place an infrastructure project and you cannot send people, how are you going to do it? And restrictions to mobility, I mean, they are very strong. I mean, it's very difficult to implement projects, to execute projects, not to mention negotiations to get new contracts, get the trust and confidence of potential clients. So it's very difficult to conduct business with such strong measures of restricting mobility. And the second concern is regarding the rules of the game. Fair competition, fair play. Why? Because there's two sets of things. On the one hand, there's some countries that have come out in a much better position from the crisis, either because they suffered it very little. I'm talking about Korea or Japan or East European countries, or because they came out early, like China, for instance. So these countries, they might be in a better position to compete than other countries, companies from other countries that have not come out so quickly. And then there's a second issue, which is government support. And there is a great difference between the support companies are getting from some countries, the US, Germany, UK, than companies from other countries, which the government has not announced measures to support as much the company. So what's going to happen? Are we still having rules of the game, fair play, or will that be distorted because of the crisis? The crisis itself or the support that companies are getting in several countries? Thank you. I think that I have restricted myself to 6 minutes and a half.
You've done very, very well. I like it, very punchy, straight down to the point. And I do understand that you represent a wider industry, but actually looking at it from your side, from the export point of view, and the clips of experiences of your members give us a very good perspective on this subject. I do understand the issue you raised, which are the major concern about restriction of mobility and the one about rules of the game, about fair and balancing. That's quite interesting. And I'll come back. I've got a few questions I would like to ask you on that, but I'm going to move swiftly to Steve Hall from ACEC, Senior Vice President, to give us perspective of what is happening in states and what the government is doing, but more important, within our space. So Stephen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Nelson, thank you so much, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the globe. It's great to be here this morning. Yeah, it's been a tumultuous period, to say the very least, and it's gotten more so in recent days. I think what's been certainly wonderful for me personally, working for this industry, and I'm the legislative advocate. I deal with the government of the United States and Congress, is how this industry has really stepped up. I think we have a good story to tell, a wonderful story to tell in how we have helped set up temporary hospitals working for the federal government and the states, helped existing hospitals to expand their surge capacity. And even, you know, when the Navy hospital ship pulled into New York Harbor, when they were in the midst of the crisis, it took an engineering company to help prepare for that ship and prepare the waterfront to allow it to operate and support the city and the state. And so, like I said, that's just a wonderful story to tell and speaks volumes for this industry. I think it's safe to say, you know, as Antonio indicated in Spain, the reaction in the United States, and indeed it appears in most countries, has been slow, and we've struggled. Were we really prepared for this pandemic? And hopefully there will be lessons learned to deal with the next one, because there will be a next one. I think there was a great deal confusion early on in terms of what was the responsibility of the federal government, what was the responsibility of the states. I think they've started to work through those problems and are working fairly well now. You know, it started out as with shutdown orders in most of the states, you know, under guidelines developed by the federal government that were actually pretty good. And now we're in the midst of coming out of those shutdowns. The city of Washington, D.C., where our office is located, has recently reopened, but reopening slowly, I think, in the case of most of the states and the cities, with restrictions on the size of gatherings, restrictions with respect to restaurants, things of that nature. And, you know, health officials are looking closely at hospital rates, infection rates, to guide their efforts going forward. One big question that's come up recently is, you know, with the protests going on in the United States, what impact could that potentially play in sort of reigniting the infection rates? That together with just, it's getting warm here. We're into summer in the US, and people are going out, they're gathering in places, and it is raising concerns among authorities about infection rates. For ACEC working with all levels of government, I think an early priority for us, and I think it's the same for all of you, has been cash flow, certainly supporting the industry through various changes in the tax code and emergency programs. The Congress has created a loan program for businesses to help keep them afloat. So that cash flow imperative was critical for ACEC, but also equally fundamentally, and this was a key thing that the government did very well early on, was designating infrastructure as an essential function. This really came from the federal government and had, I think, a significant impact in influencing the states. And because of that, our members have stayed busy. Infrastructure projects, with a few exceptions around the country. New York City shut down for a while. Pennsylvania had some shutdowns. But by and large, those projects moved forward. We had to deal with the challenges of accessing job sites and things of that nature. But having that designation, I think, has helped greatly our part of the economy. Our construction colleagues and everybody really that supports major infrastructure projects. You know, we signaled early on to the federal government the importance of doing this. We also reached out to the nation's governors in concert with other organizations to really emphasize the importance and to keep this aspect of the economy going. And I think that is one of the success stories that we can take away. And then also just the role that we've played in an information flow to the industry. And I think this really emphasizes the importance of these organizations, the FIDIC member organizations, and what they can do to support the industry, ensuring that companies have access to information on the various programs of assistance, the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP loans that were structured by Congress to be forgivable if the loans were used for retaining people and specific expenses. And that's been a huge success. And our industry was a major recipient. I think we're number 2 after construction companies, recipients of this loan assistance. And I think ACEC played a big role in that. In fact, we have actually picked up members of our organization because I think the industry out there saw us as an essential platform in getting through these trying times. So this has certainly been a key lesson for us. And like I said, just a reinforcement of how important the FIDIC organizations are to the industry, certainly in the United States, and I would argue really around the globe. So Congress, in dealing with Congress, and I do that on a daily basis, I think Congress is still very much in almost an emergency response mode. They have passed successive funding packages. We're into the trillions of dollars now of assistance. Much of that initially focused on help to individuals and companies through the forgivable loan program. I think the next step we're going to be taking is assistance to the states. Revenues have dropped in the states to support various critical functions, including infrastructure. And so Congress is looking to develop a package to provide assistance to the states really in the short term to keep those programs going and to keep state agencies functioning. And I think that's even going to flow down to local levels of government. Obviously, ACEC is supportive of that. These are agencies that we work for, and so we're weighing in. But we're hoping that Congress will switch gears soon and start to look at a more longer-term recovery agenda. And this is really where ACEC members around the country are working very hard and talking to lawmakers right now. And I've been on many calls like this one with senators and representatives to promote the idea of multi-year surface transportation programs, water programs, aviation programs, critical investments that need to be made, you know, even in the best of times need to be made. But right now, the severity of this crisis to the nation's economy are sorely needed. Congress has already been working on a couple of these things. Congress was looking to do a big surface transportation program this year and a water program. And so this is very, very timely. So Nelson, I'll wrap up there. I think I've reached the maximum amount of my time, but eager to hear from the other speakers and answer any questions that may come up.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks for that. I mean, it's interesting that we're beginning to build some profiling across the world as the common theme that is coming through. But actually, from you representing ACEC and your Congress engagement and the way you deal with this issue, I've got a lot of questions that I would like to ask you, because I'm sure the rest of the world are looking at what the United States is doing. And so, you know, there is a lot of questions to come through. So I'm going to move swiftly to Carla, which is the president of the Royal Dutch Association. Carla, would you take the floor, please, and share your experience from Netherlands? Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. Also, thank you, William, our president. And thank you all of the speakers. And Steve Hall, I like the pictures on your wall, on the birds. Beautiful. First of all, I would like to begin by wishing that you and your family are all healthy. That's, I think, the most important issue. To begin with, in March, we had the first COVID patients in the Netherlands, and the amount of patients increased quickly. And the government took strong measures. They called it an intelligent lockdown, and that means that sectors who have a lot of risks for spreading the virus, such as restaurants and theaters, they were closed. And other sectors with less risks, they were stimulated to continue the work and to make protocols. How can you work safely in your own business? Therefore, you had to make a protocol. Furthermore, the Dutch government introduced an impressive package of measures. And the most important one is that when your company has a loss of more than 20% of your revenues, you receive the salary from the government. And that means until now that the government pays the wages of 1.9 million people in the Netherlands. And in the first 3 months, the government has spent 20 billion euros to make this possible. And they've continued these programs for the next 4 months. So they expect to spend 50 or 60 billion euros on all these measures. When we look to Europe, it's quite interesting that Europe has a European Green Deal. And one of the founders of this Green Deal is Frans Timmermans. He's a commissioner from the Netherlands. And so I'm in close contact with Frans Timmermans. And the Europe policy is that this Green Deal must be central to a resilient recovery after the COVID period. This is very important because in this Green Deal, they want to bring recovery through renewed sustainable progress. That's the main core of this Green Deal. And the idea is the investments have to be green, sustainable, to bring back long-term good business in Europe. And we use this European Green Deal also in our Dutch policy. What do I do as a president of the Royal Dutch Association of Engineers? From the beginning, from the start, I decided that we have to strengthen our influence through the governments by working close together with the other associations in the building sector. So 6 chairpersons, 6 presidents of the different building sectors and the maintenance sectors in the Netherlands, we work close together and we influence the governments. And how are we doing this? First of all, we asked different ministers and the government to have each week digital calls, because we said we represent more than 10,000 companies. We represent about 2 million workers, and we don't want to be compensated. We want work, we want investments. That's our main strategy. So keep the work going for the total building and engineering sector. And we are quite successful until now, because our policy is we see that the private clients are stopping a lot of orders. So we explain to the government the public orders are now crucial for our sector. So you have to continue all the public orders. Furthermore, we said to the government, to the Minister of Infrastructure and Water, and also, and we made also an agreement with the Minister of Infrastructure and Water. We also signed an agreement with the Minister of Interior and Buildings that all the public investments had to be continued. Furthermore, we also signed in this agreement that all the public investments had to be speed up. And that is about, the average business of this amount is about 6 to 7 billions. To speed up this work, that it's a long-term infrastructure, the railway infrastructure, all the mobility, all the water protection works, all the building capacity. And they agreed, they signed it, and so now we've made task forces to work this out in practice. Which projects first in this year, which projects in 2021. So we're making a planning with representatives of the ministries, together with the engineers. So we're on the same table. Thirdly, the agreements we signed with the ministers, they became also the policy for the whole public sector, including the municipalities and the provinces. So also the local authorities have to continue the public investments, and they also have to try to speed up these investments. Finally, we also made an agreement with these 2 ministers about the financial and legal affairs. For instance, if you make a new deal now, if you have a tender and you get a new deal, what arrangements do you make during the corona crisis? If the work is going to deliver later, what does this mean in the financial and legal affairs? And we made concrete legal affairs, and we also signed that each ministry has to pay it within 30 days, for instance. also payment conditions. We made concrete agreements with the different ministries about payments. And finally, we also made protocols for how can the workers work safe. For instance, on a construction site. How can you do the work safe in the field? How can you work safe in private homes? And we made 3 protocols, also from the engineering companies. And the agencies said these are good, these protocols, and you can use them in practice. So all the work can continue because we made these safe working protocols for our businesses. How did we reach this policy? We are the most crucial point seems to me that our Association of Engineers works close together with other associations. So together we are stronger. Together we represent more companies and we represent more business. So in practice, in 1 week we have the Minister of Infrastructure direct in a call, and the next week we have the Minister of Building, and each week it turns on. 1 week infrastructure and water, the next week we have the Minister of Building. So we have direct influence. And what we see is that the ministers see now very clear the added value from engineers. We are more visible than ever. We are more visible for the governments, for the representatives in the ministries, but also we are much more visible for our own members. They see direct our added value better than ever. And we have explained our ministers that building and engineering companies that we suffer in the longer run. What do I mean? In the beginning, we have enough work, we have enough orders, but we are more critical after half a year or a year. And that's why we say we have to speed up all the public investments. I would like to conclude by saying that the COVID crisis is a chance to speed up all necessary public investments, to speed up all sustainable investments, to speed up all the digital innovations investments. We can now reach breakthroughs. It's a chance for change. And it's a chance to have huge influence from engineers in politics and policies of governments for the benefits of a better and more safer world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carla, for that. I think you've just built on what Steve said earlier, and I'm really pleased to see continuity of policies. But I think the big issue that I picked up, Carla, was about association collaborating and leveraging on the power of the company working together to make sure that the decision maker, we see us as an influencer and a solution, not a problem. That is my big message. So I'll come back to that later on, Carla. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to invite Henrique now from Brazil to give us perspective, looking at the Latin America and more Brazil in terms of what is happening there. Henrique, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. First off, are you hearing okay?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Okay. I hope everybody is doing well. And I try to say some words about Brazil and Latin America. To begin, it's important to analyze the economic, political, and sanitary scenario in Brazil. The Unified Health System, SUS, in Brazil is one of the largest and most complex public health systems in the world, ranging from simple care for blood pressure assessment to organ transplantation, ensuring full, universal and free access for the entire population of the country. Very ambitious with all the economic and operational difficulties of serving over 210 million people, a population equivalent to Germany, the United Kingdom, and France together. The year 2019, from the point of view of growth, was mediocre in Brazil as we reached about 1% only. However, by 2020, there was an expectation in January of this year to accelerate the economic projects and, as a result, achieve better GDP growth. That was January 2020. In Brazil, the first case of infection was detected on 26 February in the city of São Paulo, and from then on, spread to some cities and states in the southeast, with the first 2 deaths occurring on 17 March, Rio and São Paulo. From that date, it was the first government actions to initiate isolation in some states, but at that time, there was a great discussion between the President of the Republic, who do not want to accept the isolation, and the governors of the states and the mayor of the major cities, who supported the isolation and rules for closing all non-essential activities. Now, Brazil has more than 584,000 cases and more than 32,500 deceased persons. On the company side, large and medium-sized companies sought to quickly organize themselves for the home office and create efficient protocols for field operations and essential industrial activities. The government, delayed by about 2 weeks, began to discuss a series of emergency measures with organized civil society, which resulted in a list of provisional measures, both to help low-income individuals and for individuals and self-employed people who suddenly lost their livelihood. At the end of 3 weeks was fixed a value of 600 reais per month, about $150 for 3 months for a contingent of people who today has exceeded 70 million people and can reach 100 million people. In defense of companies, 2 lines of action have been created: order and progress. Order to review and simplify legislation, and progress with the discussion of projects and investments in infrastructure. Measures have been taken to delay taxes and charge for 90 days and open credit lines to small and medium-sized companies. In our industry, consulting engineering, the companies are being impacted with reductions between 10 and 30%, depending on the sectors and activities they carry out. In the case of greater emphasis on design, where the practice of a home office has worked well, the impact is less. In companies with the highest activity in the field, very strict protocols are being used for the operation and supervision of people who are at a risk age or with disease that require attention. With regard to fostering specific activity for our sector, there is still no concrete action in this regard, although our commitment to the authorities of the economic area is insistent that they consider the strategy of launching programs for the preparation of studies and projects to ensure intellectual work for engineering companies in the recovery phase. The only prospect that exists in this sense, quite doubtful of its success, are the various bids for new infrastructure concessions that are to take place from the second half of this year. In general, the Brazilian government did not consider it important to treat consultancy and similar sector as relevant, and we need to fight for that. One example was the measures to reduce wages dependent on union agreements precisely in the range the most interested our companies. there was greater flexibility to negotiate salaries with lower revenue employees. And of course, it's not the mass of employees in consulting firms. The public sector consulting market has so far been less harmed. Apparently, the governments, federal, state, and municipal consider that infrastructure works are activities that can contribute to keep the economy running. The effort that consulting firms have been taking in adopting design and collaboration technologies, such as BIM and Microsoft 365, has been essential to the success of the home office. Moreover, one of the consequences of this pandemic will certainly be the acceleration of the deployment of new technologies. Although, in my opinion, it is still not quite clear how to make companies even more computerized in the field of project design. Certainly, the computer tools that facilitate teamwork and organize the control and integration of disciplines are already accelerating. This challenge was already on the horizon of the discussion within the Brazilian Association, and that I intend to promote in FEPAC, the Pan-American Federation of Consulting, is a giant challenge that the consultancy must face. How to treat data that will be generated by engineers in the design of the project with experienced data in similar projects or even in the operational feedback of the project in question in order to improve the project and serve as input for new projects. How to store and use this information not only with the designers and their experience lived and tested. Each time the how to design will be computerized and the introduction of why to make or to change certain solutions will be the responsibility of the engineering consultants, and how to turn it into a project and documents for execution will be computerized. Some companies gave their employees the opportunity to take home what they thought was necessary for their job. Many did not have adequate computers, cameras, microphones, or even comfortable chairs to work 8 to 10 hours a day at home. To maintain production and consequently billing, daily routines of very fast meetings were implemented between project leaders and their respective teams, depending on the case, involving project managers or directors to keep the links between all tight. This point proved to be essential. The problem is more concentrated in field work, such as supervision of works, especially with the age risk group. We all know that experience lived in projects is essential for the management or supervision of projects. Therefore, it's usual to designate professionals in the risk branch to work in the field. Okay. There is a risk of introducing a new source of discrimination against the elderly, a subject that deserves a lot of attention. It will be important not to cause a restriction on the performance of older professionals. In general, what is already bad before a crisis is not to be expected to improve with it. In Brazil and Latin America, it's the case of engineering consulting contracts by auction or lower price, a real calamity for the sector. This needs to be fought by FIDIC as a principle and conviction with governments, investors, the World Bank, IDB, New Bank, etc. For engineering consulting companies in Brazil and Latin America, there is no way to overcome the crisis if there are no changes in the way they are contracted. It is time to convince all stakeholders in new projects that engineering contracting must be essentially quality-based. The result will always be more effective, and its true value will be the most beneficial for the investment. Similarly, which shows that respect for the environment should be more valued in the post-COVID-19 world. I estimate that the appreciation of experience and the selection by quality of the teams involved in new project is the way to better employ the available resources and introduce better solutions for a new world that is in profound change, led by the accelerated evolution of new technologies.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Henrique. I really appreciate that. I think the big message that came out of that was political denial, late response to the issue, and ultimately how does the industry deal with the price competition and we don't take advantage of the situation. So thank you very much on that. I'm going to come back to that. Can I invite the Managing Director of FEPAC Technical Services, my good friend Kabelo from Botswana, who will be speaking very quickly. And can I suggest this, please try and keep it to 7 minutes maximum about, you know, what is happening in Botswana, but give us a perspective across into more FIDIC Africa as well. So thank you very much. And by the way, congratulations on your promotion as president. So Kabelo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelson. And good day to you, colleagues and listeners from around the world. Thank you for the opportunity from FIDIC. You're doing a great job in keeping us informed during this crisis. I want to start my talk by saying that, you know, during the 2009 economic crisis, that was really bad. But as you can appreciate, there was no deliberate and physical disruption to business, such as construction and mining. So the economy was left to self-heal, if you like, as the crisis went along. The situation is very different with COVID-19 in that, you know, this has affected every nation, every town, every village, and every individual. And each country is compelled to look at its survival first before trying to help any other nation. Their lives at risk. The economic activities, you know, construction, such as infrastructure construction, which are essential to facilitate the economy, have been, you know, physically stopped through lockdowns and closing of borders, that leading to a spiraling effect in the economy. So the problem is much bigger. When it comes to Africa, the countries have been affected differently and therefore responded differently to the crisis. However, what we have in common in Africa is the lack of adequate infrastructure, such as roads, water. This has made it very, very difficult to provide the prerequisite support to the general population. The lack of manufacturing capacity has led to short supplies of essential services and goods. In fact, for some countries, the need for survival in terms of finding water and food was much more important than the risk of contracting the corona. That's how dire the situation is in some African countries. The lack of budget and lack of resources has meant that some of the construction projects had to be put aside and concentrated more on saving lives. The way that Africa responded throughout Africa was that some countries went for the total lockdown and closed borders. Some countries opted for curfews and controlled movement. This were different scenarios for every country. Construction projects were affected in most countries. The effect of this was that the small consulting firms in Africa were in fact much more affected because for 2 months there was no work that they could done. Taking it closer home to Botswana, the government here was very proactive, and I must really thank and congratulate them for that. They went very quickly when we had very few cases, I think something like 7 cases or so. They went straight and went for the lockdown, which continued for nearly 2 months. The borders were closed, only essential goods being allowed to come in with stringent testing at the border. The one thing that went very well was that most of the construction projects for major projects that involved international contractors continued with strict protocol. This has been very good in alleviating or even mitigating the potential risks of claims in some of these huge international projects. As of now, the borders have been opened with strict testing as of May, 21st May. The countries were subdivided into zones, and within each zone, free movement was allowed, with only you being required to get a permit if you were to move from one country to the other. From early on, the government issued a relief fund, or set up a relief fund, which they put a seed money of $200 million US. The business and the public contributed enormously to this fund, and the individuals also assisted. The government started helping to feed those that were not working. They provided food for those that were not working. Food packages were distributed across the country. The government then also went on to subsidize salaries of those people who couldn't earn any salary. The firms were encouraged to pay them, and the government provided subsidies to this. Tax concessions were made, loans and tax holidays were also negotiated with banks. VAT refunds from the government tax collecting agency were done promptly. The bank lowered the National Bank lowered the bank lending rate. So this somehow softened the economic impact from early on. Most constructions that involved the locals predominantly have not been going on for the last 2 months, and most of the tenders that were of non-essential, or what was considered to be non-essential projects were also stopped. Botswana being a landlocked country, we have been badly and hard hit by the lack of supplies, because by closing borders, it meant that the supplies, both food, medicine, and the necessary material required for construction could not come in. So this really made it much harder for us, and which is why some of the construction projects couldn't go on, because the supplies were in fact not there. The government now has already started an economic stimulus package. In this, they are intending to fast-track infrastructure and mining projects. One of the ways, which also involved the local consulting association here, was direct. They are intending to do direct appointment of consulting engineers for strategic government. Government intends to make agriculture and food security a priority, because we depend predominantly on South Africa for food, and this has exposed us badly during this time of the crisis. The government also intends to prioritize manufacturing. By prioritizing manufacturing, will obviously lead to more work for the consulting industry. There is going to be need for efficient and innovative delivery of projects as lessons learned from this COVID. As consulting engineers, we are going to have to come to the fore and help with the planning, assisting government with the planning of the implementation of various projects. There is going to be a lot of need for trained and experienced consulting engineers. And we think that we're going to be promoting the need for use of FIDIC documents as a way of facilitating government as they try and kickstart the economy. In terms of best response, I think the pandemic has affected the entire world, and therefore there is no suitable solution for all. It was indeed a question of horses for courses. Each country responded to the best of their ability and capacity based on the obtaining situation. In terms of the coordination. It is my belief that on the consulting industry, FIDIC provided the much needed guidance, and we were able to share with the entire of members both in Africa and in Botswana what the good work that FIDIC has been doing. And I think that after this, we are likely to see an increase in terms of our membership. As far as how the economy will evolve after this, I think it is fair to say that the jury is still out there. We really don't know how it is going to respond. It will depend on quite a lot of things as to how the government and how long the crisis ends. I want to end, Nelson, by saying that in Africa, it is going to take us much longer with major resources to recover from this crisis, because we are really starting from a negative. We've already been struggling with infrastructure before the crisis. As I talked about basic infrastructure, both in terms of health facility, in terms of water, in terms of the first mile roads from your agricultural centers, etc., etc. All of these we've been struggling in Africa. So it is going to be, there is need for basic infrastructure is going to be required, and urgently so, if we are to resuscitate the economy in most of the African countries, and if we are to improve the lives, because like I said, in some countries, COVID is secondary compared to the need to feed families. Obviously, this is also an opportunity, as there is always an opportunity in every crisis. It's an opportunity for us as engineers to step to the podium to be able to provide that necessary infrastructure planning and implementation. But first and foremost, is going to require funds. So that would be my take, Nelson. Thank you.
Thank you, Kabelo. Thank you very much for that. I think I'm going to nick your word. Really, it is a challenge, but let's see the opportunity for us to build. And I think that goes with what Carla, what Steve, and what Henrique said, is that this is an opportunity where our industry can shine and be seen as part of the solution. I do understand that the challenge in Africa may be slightly different and time zone different, but I think the key point to say, this is a time where we need to be at the table so that we can actually help to solve the problem. I am going to move on to Irawan. I know that time is not on our side. So can I please, caution if you can just keep it to 5 to 6 minutes, Irawan, so that we can open the floor up for question and answer. So Irawan, the floor is yours. Can we have 5 to 6 minutes, please? Thank you very much.
Esteemed FIDIC colleagues and speakers, greetings from Indonesia. Keep safe and healthy. I'm going to try to make it quick. Number one, as has been discussed before, we seem also to have the same issue with some of the governments, where our government take it very much with careful and step-by-step measures, basically. I have to tell you first about the background of that, because the main issues, like everybody knows, is actually between life and livelihood, health, safety, and versus economy. Yeah. Indonesia is having a problem because before we start, if I look at the IMF World Economic Outlook report issued in April, Indonesia in 2019, before the COVID really started, we are already having one of the worst, what I would call current account balance rate of change compared to what I would call other emerging and developing Asian countries. Asian, not just ASEAN. So we started with not enough money in the pocket, basically, not enough money to spend on this kind of things. Number two, our resiliency, the Indonesian resiliency of the economy, is actually based on that about 50%, 57% of our populations are actually coming from what we call the informal sector economics, which is our resiliency, which has been proven to help us in previous crises. But in this particular crisis, this particular informal economies, because of the constraint of the mobility and also on the connectivity, they are very hard hit. So the government is very, very, very careful on taking steps, because we don't want that any kind of trigger I'm sorry to use United States, Steve, as an example, that anything that can trigger the 57% to do something unduly, it can happen. So that's why my government is being very, very careful with the especially now with the largely unrecorded, if I may use unrecorded statistic and records of the informal sectors. It has been hampering also the distribution of the so-called social assistance to these players, which is also creating, starting something also. So that is really why my government is being very careful. Although we are also helped by the fact that we are the largest archipelago in the world. From end to end, we are as large, and from the end of the West Indonesia, it's almost like from, actually from Seattle to Miami on the east. And also, if you look at the same thing, we are actually about the same from China in the east and the west is about the same. But we are mostly waters. Unlike Botswana, we are mostly waters. So we have 15,000 islands. So actually, it also is a blessing because it's almost like acting as a natural buffers for the rapid spread. But it's also becoming a penalty because infrastructure for those islands has been also very, very difficult. So that is the situations why my country has been a little bit step by step. We are only starting the lockdown on the end of March. Yeah, on April, being the largest country with Muslim population, we made one very difficult decision. We made a difficult decisions of actually banning, not allowing the so-called big migration of people during the Ramadan to go home, to go to the country, to the countryside. And it's about 15% of the country population, 50% of 270 million. So it's about normally 30 to 35 million people goes back home, like in India, like in China, anything like that. We have been able to do that a bit strictly. There are, of course, some recalcitrants, but I think we are doing it very successfully, basically. So in April also, we're starting to see that we need more money. So we got IBRD and AIIB to help us with 7 billion, ADB to start up to help us with about 1.2 billion for costs and things like that. So we are starting to build our cover, but also we are doing the necessary thing, being very difficult on the religious side of things.
Irawan, can you stay close to the microphone, please? Can you stay close to the microphone, please?
I will try to say, yeah. On May, we are starting to actually to do a better planning. Even better planning, already starting to start a new normal planning, although it's a bit early. But the lockdown is not working too well. So around the end of May, our president asking the security enforcement to actually enforce things. The lockdown is being effective. Matter of fact, just today, Jakarta has to continue the lockdown until the end of June, basically, because things are not yet improving. Just 2 days ago, the government also made another very bold steps on religious issues by banning the Hajj pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia, which usually take about 250,000 Indonesian people, because we are the largest contingent of Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca. It's also being banned. So I think we are doing it very slowly, but it's starting to take effect basically right now. Although it is still very slow. Jakarta is still locked down. But like in my city, Bandung, my office now, starting yesterday, is open, allowed to be open with 30% of its actually staff. Yeah. And again, I would like to also say that basically, the industry, the construction, I would like to talk about the effect of the construction industry. Construction industry, not only consulting, but also construction and construction contractors and everything, is actually 10.7% out in the normal situation of Indonesian GDP. Yep. The normal growth, usually construction being number 4 players, is having normally the largest growth in normal things. In Q1 2014, we have 5.9% growth compared to the largest, which is manufacturing, only 3.9. And somewhat somehow, although everybody's growth is actually reducing, the Q1 of 2020, construction somewhat somehow is still having the largest growth, 2.9%. So we are okay. Just like the US, we are still ticking. We are still ticking. But
Rawan,
again,
1 minute, Rawan, please finish. 1 minute to finish, please.
Yes.
1 minute.
Okay. Yeah. But again, we have some problem also because of the fact that construction is being sort of slightly sidelined by our ministry compared to the manufacturing. We are still having a problem with the growth and everything because of that. But in the construction or on the consulting side, we are taking the opportunity. And the opportunity on the construction side, consulting side, is that design of amazingly has become more efficient. Everything that produces drawings has become more efficient. But also, like in Brazil, the challenges will be on the side project management, construction management because of the mobility. So basically, ASEAN and ASPAC ASEAN actually is waning down in terms of its centrality for the time being. But yesterday, ASPAC, which is the United Nations East Economic and Social Commissions of Asia Pacific, just signed an MOU with ADB. And one of them, because the Secretary General is from Indonesia, reminding me, Irawan, you are the head of FIDIC ASPAC, let's get moving. So I'm also being pushed by that. Okay. Thank you very much for the time that was given to me. Greeting again from Indonesia.
Thank you, Irawan. Thank you very much for that. I mean, normally we will be wrapping it up now, but we did say at the beginning that we're going to try and push this to about 1:45. So we've got roughly about 20 minutes, but I'm just going to give it a quick start. I know that Barbara has opened the floor out for question and answer session, but perhaps I can throw one question is, what I hear again and again is about, and I think Steve said it, he said, you know, we should be proud of our industry because we help to bail out, you know, all the challenges, either helping in building a hospital or fast tracking projects or keeping the economy. And I also hear from Carla earlier on talking about the industry talking together, collaborating together. I just want to push that. I mean, there is a lot to be done. We haven't come out of it fully. And I hear comments round the table that because we haven't got the vaccination yet, so we don't really have a solution. And I also heard Steve say, well, somebody is coming up, maybe things will slow down. Irawan said, yeah, we have issues to do with, you know, you have the idea of having various islands in Indonesia, so you have some defensive mechanism not spreading it. Do we think we are, you know, working together as an industry enough to make sure that the message from our industry to government is crystal clear? And are we positioning ourselves and to use the word by my old friend David Raymond to say, you have to be at the table, otherwise you become part of the menu. The big issue, are we at the table and are we engaging enough to influence? So I'm going to start with Carla. Your example in Netherlands tells me as something we ought to look at. Do you think we are doing enough to get at the table to influence the decision, or could we do more? Carla, can you unmute, please, here?
Thank you very much. I'm quite sure we are in the Netherlands as engineering companies and as a president of these engineering companies, I'm really at the right table now. Better than before. It's our time, you said it's our time to shine. And we have to take the chair at the table. And what I notice is that members of the government, the ministers, see now much better our practical, integrated good work. They see also for the climate change and all the things. We have a nitrogen problem also in the Netherlands. For all the environmental problems, to solve these problems, they see we need the engineers. So, and we use this statement for influence. But it's important to get on the table. And I think we have the right story to be at the table. But what can we do better? I think we can share our approaches better. And that's why I'm glad to be a member of FIDIC. And I'm very glad with this webinar, because I'm also inspired by the other speakers. And I think we can better exchange our views, how we get the chair on the table. What is the storyline? Our storyline is very easy. Invest and speed up the investments and don't compensate us. We want the investments. That's a very short, strong message. And I use it everywhere.
Thank you.
But we can share these messages and we can learn from each other.
Thank you very much, Carla. Steve, this is your word. I'm playing it back. I'm sure you invent the whole concept. I mean, obviously you are, I mean, I know that, for example, that we've got Linda, being appointed, by the president to play a key role in how do we come out of this. And you raised the issue about the role of the FIDIC and the role about the member association. I mean, within state, of course, you're based in DC. Do you think at different states, which are all members of your association, are they all singing with the same hymn? I mean, do you find any difference? Are they all at the table at the state level? And can we learn lesson from what they are doing at state level?
They definitely are, Nelson. And yeah, I think the fact that Linda was appointed by the president is probably the most visible manifestation of us being at the table. We're the only engineering organization actually at that table to advise on the reopening and revitalizing of the economy. Yeah, ACEC's role is not to observe. I mean, we're there to shape policies on behalf of the industry and to drive an agenda, and both at the national level and at the state level. And I think everybody's doing a good job. We still have a lot of work to do. As I talked about, we've got some big things we'd like to accomplish this year, but we're definitely at the table. And I have to say, what impresses me certainly about our industry and everybody really saying things consistently and delivering a consistent message. But I even observed this, Nelson, when I was working in Congress. I spent about half my life post-college working in Congress, being lobbied by engineers and folks like you before I joined ACEC. And even then, I was impressed by the extent to which the infrastructure community was united. And so it's not just ACEC's voice, it's the contractor's voice, it's the material suppliers, everybody that cares about this and has an investment in this is largely working together and speaking together. And we meet on a daily basis talking about what's happening in Congress, what do we need to do together. And that makes a huge difference. Even in those circumstances, it's a challenge to get things done, but it's made, I think, a bit more easy when we're all working well together. And that's generally the case for infrastructure.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Kabelo now. I know you've just finished speaking. One of the points that you picked up, I think you said different parts of Africa are different faces, and it's either lockdown or curfew. But you also raised a fundamental issue that is either survivor or COVID. And I just wonder, do you think as an industry that we are good at sharing knowledge that can transcend? I know FIDIC is really at that pinnacle of getting best practice and putting it across. Do you think we are doing enough on the advocacy side that can help, from continent to continent? Or do we have to leave it to individual continent to find a solution?
Firstly, I must say that, obviously, as you are aware, Africa is such a vast continent, and also with different languages that are spoken. That alone has created a challenge in terms of ensuring that we have enough members within FIDIC Africa. And, my presidency is going to be focused in trying to break that barrier. Secondly, is to say that there is enough information out there. And what we need to do is to inculcate that spirit of making sure that we say consistent information, we say the same thing over and over again. And also to ensure that we are represented within bodies that matter. In Botswana, we are represented in Business Botswana, which is where decision making is done. Business Botswana is part of the government decision making bodies. We are also represented in the Engineers Registration Board. If we can get all these structures replicated throughout Africa, then the information will cascade. Because mind you, there is enough information coming from FIDIC. There is enough and very good support coming from FIDIC. But the question is, it shouldn't stop at the MWAs. It shouldn't stop at we should pass it on. We can't be lecturing or preaching to ourselves. We need to be preaching to those that are not converted. And that means knocking on doors with government, telling them the good story that we are in terms of the principles that we stand for as FIDIC. And I think once we get that, then we will certainly be able to break through in terms of us as a good organization that we are.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kabelo. Can I come back to Henrique now? Because I mean, when you talk about Brazil and you talk about the whole of Latin America and try to pull experience, I was just wondering if the government happens to be in denial. Are there, are we as an industry, are we providing enough guidance to help them? Because when I was in practice and running an association in UK, I find that most politicians, they really don't get our sector. They don't understand it. And what we need to do is to find a way to communicate to them in a simple layman language. As Steve always say, keep it short, keep it simple, and keep it brief. Do you think we're doing enough in simplify our language to ensure that government and politicians who come into office and then feel they understand it when in fact they don't understand it, but really we are the health and the engine for the industry? Are we getting our message across to the politician in a way that they can digest it? Do you think we are in that position in Brazil, or do we have more to do in that area?
Great questions. Now, always, we've been, the position of engineers in Brazil was very, very interesting 50 years ago. But in last times, we see that the politicians try to make more with less money. And that is a huge problem, because we cannot produce the same project with half the money we needed for that. And that's the question that we are trying to have in this moment, is to convince the government, the politicians all together to change the way to invest money. We have to invest money with quality. Quality means to select the best people, the best companies to do the work, not doing with very low investment on that. That's the moment we are trying to convince all the people that is the moment to make change. I received yesterday a message from my son-in-law, that's Greek. He said me this sentence: the ancient Greek, as usual, had a work for that moment. Kairos refers to a moment in time where we can change things. And as we start to see economies opening up slightly, the moment for capturing the rare opportunities presented by car is fast approaching. I hope so.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, the other question which I was going to pick up, and I think it was mentioned by Carla, and again, Bill, when he started his opening statement, he talked about, yes, COVID will come and go, but those key issues as sustainability and producing issue of thought leadership will continue to be the real truth of things we use to drive our messaging to business leaders and industry. And in Carla's talk, where he talks about, this Green Deal, because government is now looking for what renewable investment asset that will attract, investment. I just want to put that across, perhaps looking through, Carla, do you think is a golden opportunity for us now to engineer a solution that actually address the green agenda and still provide a sustainable one? Or are we going to wait for the government to tell us what to do? Is it our case to take the lead, or do we follow? Carla.
Thank you. Well, I think it's time to take leadership, that the engineers take more leadership. I recognize that we were too much unknown, also for politicians. They didn't knew the engineers very well. And now if we look to the main problems of the world, if we look to the report of the OECD, we see the 5 main problems of the world are water shortages, food shortages, climate change, water security, and ecological disasters. So if these 5 are on the top of the list, then we have the profession to solve these problems, which will affect everybody in this world, in each village and each person. So I really believe that we have to stand up, and that we have to hear our voice, and that we have to come with concrete, strategic, but also practical ideas. And we already do this in all the projects all over the world, but we have to put it on a more aggregate level now to influence the policies. So because we are already active in the field, but I think we have to take the helicopter view.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Antonio, I'm not sure whether we've still got you or whether we've lost you. You seem to sort of disappear on there, so I'm not quite, but
I'm still here.
Are you? Thank you. Antonio, one of the things you said in your presentation, of course, you said you represent a wider community in your organization, Export. But part of that cover consulting engineering firm, but other sector. Do you think our industry is proactive enough, or can we learn lessons from other sectors that are in the export club of yours that actually can help us to get the communication? Because consulting engineers project is not just for the domestic market. We travel around the world and we export our capability. We bring expertise to different parts of the world. Are we learning from other sectors, or do you think we are ahead of the sector?
Can I be very frank and open?
Please.
Well, engineers are very good at what they do. Yeah. You need to be intelligent and hardworking to become an engineer. Even a bad engineer, but it requires a lot of work. But I think that in general, engineers are not, and I'm sure that you will agree with me, engineers in general are not very good communicators. Which is, I think it's a point, because I think that FIDIC and the rest of organizations, engineering, construction organizations, I think that they have to do a little bit more an effort to communicate. Because, I mean, you do have, and I've seen that in Spain, many good papers, proposals, ideas are very well expressed, but they don't get through enough. And probably what you could do, we're doing it in Spain, definitely, is we are teaming up with other organizations so that our message, I mean, there's only one single message that we transmit to our government or to our political parties. And then I think that the message gets better through. So we have to join forces with all sorts of business organizations, with all sorts of organizations that are interested in international business, like FIDIC. I mean, FIDIC, its role is international business.
Thank you very much for that frank, feedback. I expected nothing but that. Mr. President, I'm going to call you back, but I'm just going to go around. I'm mindful that we said we need to try and wrap up on time. We've gone extra 15 minutes, which is expected, because I do believe that we have world-class speaker and we've learned a lot around the world. Bill, I'm going to call you later on, but I'm going to start off from Lou, who started what will be your message to FIDIC and to the rest of our profession about how we engage? Simple sentence. I'm going to go around in the order that I can see you on the screen. So Lou, would you give me your warm message to FIDIC and to the rest of the world?
So for me, just very briefly, I think for the infrastructure sector is a key, let's say, driver for the social economy. Of course, for the consulting engineering industry, it's a very important role to move all the, let's say, infrastructure forward. Of course, right now we are under great pressure about the COVID-19 crisis, but we're not only, let's say, always under pressure. We need to also get some confidence. We still have much more, let's say, opportunities, especially, let's say, take an example in China, infrastructure still huge.
Thank you.
So I think we will have, still can have a bright future.
Thank you very much. Carla, can I come to you? What is your warm message that you want to share with us? I've heard the word collaboration several times and a great deal. So what's your warm message to FIDIC and to the consulting industry as we come out of these challenges?
Share your knowledge, make collaborations with other businesses, and have influence in politics in your own country, at least.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go into Henrique, your comments, please, your closing comments.
Words. Uncertainty is the question posed. I understand that class, entities, and companies altogether need to put the points they consider important, prepare a plan to act, and permanently reevaluate the planning. The moment needs to be very intelligent and objective.
Thank you very much. Irawan, what's your advice, please? I can't hear you. Can you unmute, please?
We should take the opportunity of this crisis to embrace stakeholders, our stakeholders, for educating each other. It's important. I would like to say educating each other. It's not trying to be paternalistic. I think educating each other. The government can educate us. We can educate the governments. We can educate the stakeholders, our populations, our workforce, and collaborate, basically. So I think what we call co-educating is very important in this. And then when we learn together, we take this as an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve, your say.
Thanks, Nelson. Yeah, I would concur with a lot of what's been said already, particularly collaboration. I think the platform that ACEC has provided to help firms communicate with each other in getting through this crisis has been critical. I guess the main point I would leave with you, though, is the critical importance of focus. This industry needs to decide what it wants, come up with a plan to achieve it, come up with messaging and a strategy based on who the audience is, whether it's lawmakers or the public, to talk about what we do in ways that they will understand. But that focus, defining a clear agenda and a clear message to achieve that agenda is absolutely critical, certainly in everything that I do, but I think for the larger industry.
Thank you very much. Kabelo, please, your last statement. Can you unmute, please?
Thank you, Nelson. I think what is important is that, no matter what happens, no matter what we do, engineering, consulting engineering shall remain a very, very essential service and component. And I think at the forefront of that, one of our biggest responsibilities and objective is to improve lives. But the danger we have is that most of the time we talk to ourselves. We convince each other about our importance. The people out there, They actually don't know why the roof, they think it's God-given that the roof above their head is not falling down. They think it's God-given that water keeps coming to the tap. And we need to be able to make them understand that there is a lot of work behind that, and therefore be able, for us, we must be the first point of call for any development, be it planning or construction. But that information is not for you, it's for the people that are decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kabelo. Mr. President, you got 1 minute to wrap that up.
That's an incredible challenge, Nelson, but I will try. First of all, thank you very much, all you speakers. You've just been absolutely terrific, and you certainly pushed some buttons that have been really on my agenda for quite some time. I think that one of the things that we need to do within FIDIC is constantly evaluate ways that we communicate beyond our profession to decision makers. We are uniquely positioned to do that. And our credibility as a profession, I believe, is increasing dramatically as more people understand what we do. And the message, I think we can make it relatively simple. The world has an infrastructure challenge. We had it before the pandemic, and it's going to, if anything, get a bit worse or more challenging. And it relates to climate change, to sanitation, and to sustainability. And the types of infrastructure vary from country to country, but almost all countries need to invest more. And engineers can lead that effort, and in so doing, reduce the cost, get things done better, and perhaps even faster with all the tools we have. Easy, and again, we need to communicate that message to the people and entities that can do something about it in terms of investing, and that's government and private sector clients and international banks, etc. So probably went beyond a minute, Nelson, but that's the best I could do with a summary.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. Thank you very much. First of all, can I start by saying it's been fascinating to walk around the world. That's what we've done this morning or this afternoon or this evening. We walk around the world. We take a sort of helicopter view of what's going on, and we've listened to eminent speakers with experiences talking about what is happening in their country, which I think has been very stimulating. I want to start off by saying I want to thank you, all panel speakers, for your time and your dedication and preparation towards this contribution, which I believe the entire family of FIDIC worldwide will appreciate, to have this one point where for 1 hour, 45 minutes, they can listen to the experiences around the world and continue. So thank you very much. I'm not going to go through the individual names, but you know who you are. You've done extremely well to be able to give me your perspective. So thank you very much. I want to thank our president. I'm blown off. I'm really blown off, Bill, you know, honestly, with your time. And I also want to thank Leo as well, who, you know, gave us very insightful view at the beginning. I want to start and thank all the FIDIC staff, notwithstanding the pressure on the internet. We managed to stay alive throughout the whole process. Nothing get cut off. That's wonderful. Barbara, you know, Nadia and Andy and everybody behind the scene. As usual, Andy will compile this into one pager. In the word of Steve, keep it simple, keep it digestible, and we make it available to you. So Andy, thank you very much for your time. I want to thank all those participants, wherever you are around the world, for giving your time. I know some of you are in the morning, some of you are in the evening, some of you are very late in the evening, and you've joined us to share this particular issue. A lot of the questions that came out of are really statement rather than question. What I've tried to do is to tease out during the conversation what the issues are, and I think we got the best possible response, which I think will be useful. Obviously, we'll continue with this debate. And the next item that we're going to cover is how can the infrastructure industry improve its resilience in dealing with future global pandemics. So the conversation we had today has been a good, insightful to take us through. I hear the word that we need to share knowledge. I hear the word that we need to influence the politician. I understand the issue about working in a collaborative manner. I also hear the word about focus on what our needs are, what our messages are, and how we're going to package that. That to me is absolutely important. I also understand that, you know, the word said consulting engineers have a role to play, but we have to stop talking to ourselves. We need to speak to the influencer. We need to get to their heart, to their mind. We need to communicate, and we need to communicate in a very simple language. This is a challenge for FIDIC. This is a challenge for all our MA, and this is a challenge for all our industry. So on that note, without further ado, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody, and I wish you all the very best. Wherever you are, keep safe. Take care. God bless. Thank you.